as we have now so many people interested in AKS hybrid, they're deploying not only a Hello app, they're now deploying more apps and also want to scale. Is horizontal or vertical scaling of pods and nodes supported?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Both of those scalars are supported in AKS hybrid, right? So let's just start first with horizontal pod autoscaler. That's a built-in feature in Kubernetes. So it's available to pretty much every kind of Kubernetes distribution out there. The way this works, as you probably are aware of, is we are defining in our deployment set some metrics based on resource utilization by default, which could be CPU or memory, although we could augment this with some more advanced utilization patterns based on custom metrics. And if those thresholds based on those metrics are met, then Kubernetes will try to start spawning additional instances of those pods to try to meet with the higher demand or throughput that the application might be experiencing. So this is built in, it's fully available in AKS hybrid as you would expect from any kind of Kubernetes cluster distribution. We only need to define our thresholds for our applications and Kubernetes will do that. At some point, what might happen, though, is that we are trying to schedule additional pods, but we don't have enough capacity in our AKS hybrid cluster, right? So at this point is where we have cluster autoscaler kick in. Cluster autoscaler will work by monitoring the number of pods that cannot be allocated by the scheduler, pods that have been evicted. And if there are, it will try to spin up additional instances of our VMs in our cluster to be able to cope with this additional demand of pods to be allocated. So cluster autoscaler is also supported on AKS hybrid. So we have two options on AKS hybrid for autoscaling our cluster. We can always manually do it through PowerShell commands, which probably is not ideal. But we can also enable cluster autoscaler, and it will work like any other vertical cluster autoscaler for any other Kubernetes distribution. It will monitor pods that cannot be allocated in our cluster. It will monitor autoscaler profiles. And if the conditions are met, then it will spin up additional VM instances in our Stack HCI environment, add them to the cluster as new worker nodes, and then eventually those pods will be allocated to those new instances, like we would expect in any other kind of, like similarly it will happen in AKS in the cloud with VM scale sets. Here it will happen with VM instances in HCI hybrid. The similar functionality, it will remove nodes where they are not utilized based on the autoscaler profile configuration, which we have full access to through the autoscaler config map. And we can configure the behavior of it. So both are fully supported in AKS hybrid.
Perfect. Just a quick question to get more of your knowledge or more out of your head while having you on the call. In which scenarios do you would recommend to horizontal versus vertical scale?
You'll need both. I mean, as an application owner, you are typically only interested in the horizontal pod autoscaler, okay? Cluster autoscaler is provided by the infrastructure. As an application owner, you're not aware that it even exists, probably. You're interested in the pod autoscaling. So you define under which patterns your application should increase the number of replicas that will be used to host the solution because you know how your application behaves and you know under which circumstances should that happen. And you can make that decision, as I mentioned, based on things like CPU, memory utilization, but you can expand this through custom metrics in Kubernetes, and you can use things like KEDA, for instance, to use external sources of input, like maybe the external load balancer throughput, to make that decision. So it's your application it's your responsibility as an application owner to define this scaling behavior for your application. The system administrator, the owner of the AKS hybrid infrastructure, will be responsible to making sure that if there are not enough VMs able to cope with the demands of pods that needs to be located, that new VMs are created and attached to this cluster. And this will typically be done through configuring the autoscaler feature that comes with AKS Hybrid or any other Kubernetes distribution. So I would say there are two different roles involved in here. The application owner will be normally responsible for the horizontal pod autoscaling profiles because he has the knowledge of how the application will behave. The system administrator or Kubernetes administrator will configure the cluster autoscaler for vertical scaling of nodes if the demand requires it.
Okay. Thank you for helping me with that question.
No problem.